Welcome to Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth, the podcast where we explore the beautiful, messy and transformative magic that happens when we dare to go within. I'm your host, Robin Harris, and in each episode we'll dive into real, honest stories from people who've faced their fears, embraced their vulnerabilities and discovered unexpected growth in their personal lives, careers, or businesses. This is a space for deep listening, open hearts, and soul-nourishing conversations. Because when we meet ourselves in our rawest moments, that's often where our greatest wisdom starts. Let's begin. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth. And today I am delighted to have Gill Mathias with me. And just as an introduction, she is a qualified, award-winning resilience specialist and holistic therapist. And she founded Gold Coach 20 years ago and has programs to help clients both personally and professionally with the many challenges in mid or later life. And Gill works with people to foster new purpose, clarity, confidence and quality of life with structured support and accountability. She believes the most exciting role of coaching is when the client experiences those light bulb moments, as if someone has flicked a switch which brings them clarity and empowerment. And while she says the solution to any problem is within yourself, it also helps to talk with a non-judgmental coach who poses powerful questions. I love those powerful questions. Welcome, Gill. It's great to have you here.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Robin. I'm really looking forward to our podcast.
And I always start these podcast episodes with 3 quick questions that only need short answers. The aim of them is to help the viewer, the listener, to tune in and to know the sorts of things that we might be discussing in our conversation today and to help them get a sense of who you are and where our conversation might lead. So the first one of those is, what makes your story relatable for others?
Well, because I coach people in mid or later life, I think that I am an example about how you can actually have a fulfilling life. I'm 76. I've done many things in my life, but there are so many coping strategies to help with when you're over 50, over 60, over 70. Life doesn't end when you are 50 or 60 or 70. And in fact, it's just the beginning and it's never too late to start. And life doesn't define you from your earlier stages. It's in fact what you do later in life that is more important.
That's so true. That's a really interesting way of looking at it, because so often we worry early in life. And even I remember being at school and that sense of I have to make the right choices for my exams, for my future. Yeah. But that's so true. We can change, we can pivot at any point. So I love that. Fabulous. And who do you feel will gain the most from listening into this conversation?
Well, I help both men and women. I help people who are busy professionals, but there are so many inspiring ladies and men who don't see or can't unlock their potential. And my clients will tell me that my superpower is by asking powerful questions, by having those important silences that they can work out for themselves how they can move forward and have a wonderful life, like on the wheel of life. You know, you work, you enjoy your leisure time, you enjoy your family, your friends, your animals. It's what you eat is important, how you exercise. And I suppose that I would like to look at myself as having been an example of getting to my tender age and still having a wonderful, enjoyable life. Although, having said that, we all have our ups and downs, but that's where resilience comes into it, is how the ability to bounce back after challenging times.
And those silences are so valuable, aren't they? The questions and then just letting them settle, letting them filter through, letting that inner wisdom speak. I love that.
Definitely. Yeah.
So, what do you hope people will take away from listening in?
I think it's a difficult time at the moment, and many people are wondering what life is going to bring. But there are many easy coping challenges to deal with the difficult times. And I hope that they listen to this. I hope that they understand or realize that although I've been very fortunate to go and have many years living overseas, to have many things going brilliantly in my life, there have also been terrific ups and downs. And it's how you move forward from those and adapt to the new challenges.
Yes, it's that adaptability, isn't it? Like you say, the resilience, the adaptability, and the knowing that we have that potential within us.
Yeah.
And that no matter how painful, difficult, challenging a time might be, things change. Things are always shifting, change being one of the constants in life, one of those paradoxes.
I would say that with change brings opportunities. And I think that many people have a very fixed mindset. And some of my coaching is encouraging people to have a real personal growth mindset where they can see that opportunities, change and opportunities are good. And that you don't need to go and get stuck on that same roller coaster. You can move off the roller coaster, move on, and be highly successful in whatever you do. And success is a difficult word because it's whatever success means to the individual. And that might be having a wonderful family life. It might be making loads of money, but it's actually how you get a content and peaceful life. And that's the important part.
I love that we started from that point. That's brilliant. And there's that, is it Chinese character for crisis or something, which actually has the symbol for opportunity in it?
I think it is. I think it is. I think you're right.
I love that way of looking at things. I'm very passionate about our perspective, and it's our perspective that influences how things turn out in our life. Because if we can look with that personal growth, opportunity, mindset perspective, then we open ourselves up to the potentials that are there. We see the opening doors when one has closed, and we can then explore different options. So, when you think back on your journey, you've given us a little flavour, you lived overseas, you've had many adventures. When you think back on all of those times, can you pick one and share where you felt really vulnerable, that kind of vulnerability that shakes you up inside? What was that experience like for you?
It's really interesting because the example I think I'm going to give to you took place in the early 70s. Some of your listeners would have been born then, because the idea of vulnerability was originally described as being hurt or wounded and as a weakness. But it was Brené Brown who changed all this, I think in about 2010 or something. And she talked about it as being a strength and the greatest measure of courage. And when I look back, that is absolutely true, because vulnerability is uncertainty, it's risk, it's emotional exposure, it's stepping out of your comfort zone, it's powerlessness, fear of the future, and insecurity. But I do feel that vulnerability is a major step in building mental strength. And actually, with my experience, this is how I then eventually went on to doing resilience, but that's not answering your question. I think that the example I'm going to give you is when we were posted with my husband to Nigeria in the late 70s, along with two children, age 6 and 4. We were in a country which was underdeveloped. It had real problems with infrastructure. There was a massive amount of burglaries and robbers around. And I think that often one felt vulnerable just going outside with young children. But the example I'm going to give you is that when my eldest son, our eldest son, was 6, he was playing in the playground at school. He thought he was Tarzan. He was swinging from one branch to another, and the branch broke. So the nurse rings from school and says, I'm so sorry, Mrs. Mathias, your son has actually fallen. I think he's fine, but his leg does look, his leg and his foot do look a bit twisted. So, of course, what do you feel? You feel fear, you feel anxiety, you collect your son, and it's very, 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 very clear that he has broken his leg. And the problem with Nigeria was that the medical stage, the conventional medical help there was very poor. However, I did manage to get him put into plaster, but it was very clear that it wasn't right. And then we had a decision to go and make, is what are we going to do about this? Because clearly the plaster hadn't been, it only put up to the knee, and he'd broken his fibula and his tibia, so it needed to go up to the thigh. So we had to fly back to England. And this was a problem because you're thinking to yourself, what on earth are we doing living in a country like Nigeria at that stage? I'm sure it has massively improved now. And so the decision was made that I'd fly back with my eldest son, which left my daughter in Lagos for a few days with her father, before I then flew back, having been treated in England, where our son stayed with his grandparents. I flew back to Nigeria and came back with my daughter back to the UK, where we were here for 6 weeks. I think that what that felt to me was just complete fear. I felt totally out of my comfort zone because I'm somebody who likes to sort of be in control of what I feel. And that was a horrible experience, followed by when we got back to Nigeria about 8 weeks later with a completely healed fibula and tibia, our daughter developed double pneumonia. And that, again, with the conventional medicine, what do you do? There was nobody around to help. And everybody in Nigeria had nannies. And our nanny was called Fanny. So Fanny went out into the garden and she picked the plants. She picked the tea tree. She picked the lemon. She picked the lavender. And she put all of those into hot water for our daughter to inhale. And it actually made so much difference to her that that was my reason that I went into train on holistic therapy and on resilience. But what did it do? Oh my goodness me, you feel powerless as a parent. And I repeat, we were thinking what we were doing in Nigeria. I mean, we had massive support and friends, but none of them were doctors. One was a physiotherapist, so she came to go massage Louise's lungs. But it was a really frightening experience. And I think that that completely developed the person that I have become today. Without that experience, I'm not sure that I would have moved into aromatherapy. I'm not sure that I would have retrained as a resilience coach. So it is circumstances. And so in a way, although it was bad luck for them, it was a fortunate circumstance. That's rather a long answer to a short question.
But I love the way that life does take us on a journey, and
Yes.
that your nanny knew. I presume she just had grown up knowing that the infrastructure, the medical system that we have here was not available, and therefore you learn how to take care of yourself in ways that those of us living in the UK might not be aware of. So she knew to go out and just pick, and she knew which herbs to pick.
Absolutely.
And we know now through aromatherapy and so on how powerful things like tea tree and lemon and lavender actually are.
Yep.
And lavender we think of as being quite a mild essential oil, but there are contraindications even for lavender. Yep. And it is very powerful and very beneficial. I use it regularly myself, and lots of other things as well. Yep. And I love that we have plant wisdom there, that we can just literally go out into our gardens and pick things even like dandelions that most of us class as weeds because we don't like them in our gardens and they can be a bit invasive. but they are so valuable. We
Yep.
can put them in salads. We can drink dandelion tea, and people drink dandelion and burdock, don't they? And you can feed them to horses and do all sorts of things. Just
Yes.
that very common thing that we dismiss.
Yes.
And I love thyme and yarrow. I didn't really realize what yarrow was. I'd learned
Yep.
about it in learning about essential oils, but I didn't know the plant.
Yes.
Kind of
Yes.
until I moved here, and then I discovered it's very common. I
It
was
is.
thinking
And
it was this exotic plant.
yes. And the interesting thing is about living in Nigeria, or actually in South Africa, is that because a lot of the people do not have any money, they wouldn't be able to afford to go to a doctor if they could find one. So they relied on complementary health. There were things like, I don't know, there's no wives' tale, but when my children were sick, my lovely nanny would go and say, oh, here's some Coca-Cola, make sure it's flat, and get them to drink that. So I don't know what's in the recipe of Coca-Cola, nobody does, but it seemed to go and help. And I actually think also another thing, which is slightly again off the subject, but it was all to do with energy with children. They never wore any shoes. And it's always talk about being grounded into the ground. And if you feel a bit low one day, go outside, go onto the grass, don't wear shoes because it helps you feel grounded. And they were the happiest people you could ever imagine. There was never a moan in sight for them. And because they did, without knowing it, they lived a complementary therapy life.
And that's such an important message in and of itself, because we have detached so much compared to how we used to live. Because in this country as well, there
Mm.
were many times in history when people didn't have the money for a doctor. It was something that you didn't do unless you
Yes.
absolutely had to.
Mm.
You
Mm.
knew what to go out and pick, and you knew about moss to pack wounds and
Yeah.
all sorts of different things. We had agency over our own well-being.
Mm.
We hadn't yet given that power away to the extent that we have now.
Yeah.
And generally we managed
Yeah.
without the doctor.
Yeah.
And that we can take that back. We can look to plants. We can look to our own, what's my body asking for today? What kind of thing do I need?
Absolutely. I quite agree.
Definitely nature and grounding. I don't wear shoes when I'm at home, whether I'm outside, inside, I walk around barefoot, and it has made such a difference to me.
Yes.
And
Yes.
definitely that sense of being connected to the place in which I live, to the
Yes.
earth.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
it does make a huge, maybe subtle,
Yeah.
but it does at the same time make a huge difference. And done over time, sometimes you might not notice it too much in the moment, or it passes quickly once you put your shoes back on and you just carry on with your day. But over time, if you walk around barefoot, you do notice. And the first thing I do now when I get home is take my shoes off
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
if I've had to wear them when I'm out.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of people like their shoes. A lot of owners of houses want their guests to take their shoes off, but not for the reasons we're talking about. But it is grounding to the ground. And actually, probably not on a filthy wet day, but this morning I was outside. And I didn't put my shoes on to go out because I wanted to water a buddleia, which looks as though it's not going to survive, but I'm trying to make it survive, and I'm telling it to survive. And of course, it was the king who started talking to the plants, and people thinking him crazy. But actually, I think it really does work.
Yes, and it's been in sitcoms, they used it in The Good Life, and there have been
Yes.
research projects into speaking to plants and what you say to them, and Masaru Emoto sending emotions to water and how the
Yep.
water then freezes and the patterns that
Yes.
it forms.
Yep. Yep.
And I've been outside because I did a kind of a challenge to myself to go barefoot. It must be about 18 months ago now. And then I was talking to a colleague about it, and we challenged ourselves to go outside in the snow. We were going to go outside. Well, no, it wasn't the snow specifically. It was on the first day of the year, which
Yeah.
potentially would have been snow, certainly would have been quite cold on the 1st of January. I didn't remember on the 1st of January, but I think it was the 4th or 5th, we had snow, and I went outside
Yeah.
barefoot.
Yeah.
Didn't stay out very long, I have to admit. But still, there's something in each season and in each weather condition, because I've been out in the rain, I've been out in the sun, I've been out in the snow, and
Yeah.
it helps. I think there's something about connecting with the seasons as well if you live in a seasonal climate.
Yes. Yes, I think all of that is true. And in fact, you went back to sort of organic living. Of course, during the war and before, people just had their places where they could go and grow their plants, and everything was fresh. And of course, with the Scandinavians, they started this idea about going out in the snow and then coming back into the heat of the sauna, and it really, really helps. So anybody listening, try it.
Yeah, don't knock it until you try it. I'm not sure I'm quite up for those plunge pools in ice, but yes,
No,
I know.
I'm not into that. I prefer my warm shower.
Definitely. So, getting back to the conversation we were having and your
Yeah.
time in Africa, in that space of vulnerability, what did you notice was going on for you more internally in your thoughts, your body, your sense of self during all those challenges?
Well, I think with having young children in an undeveloped country, we were there for 4 years, it was the fear. What if things go badly? What if we can't sort this out? Will I feel responsible? Will I feel guilty? Was probably the thoughts. I think with the body, it's always that feeling of things feeling tight in your stomach. You know that awful pit in your stomach when you get, if you don't know, if you were getting exam results or something like that, you're thinking, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. So I think it's a tight chest, pit in your stomach. What did I sense of self? I think that actually, I suppose what it taught me was, as Brené Brown said, I think it taught me courage, and gave me emotional strength, which I think I didn't realize that I had in my 30s, but has definitely molded me into the person that I was, because I'm not sure we talked about vulnerability in the same way that we do now. And it's so interesting when you reflect back or you have conversations with children and particularly grandchildren. And I think that's really helpful to them. And you hope that it helps them to believe in themselves and they can do anything that they want. I mean, that isn't actually true, but you can help them believe in themselves.
I think people say you can do anything, you can do anything.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that that's true. I think you can do anything that calls to you and
Yeah.
that you are prepared to put as much energy, effort, attention, focus into
Yeah.
as is
Yeah.
required.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to learn to fly a plane, I could, but it's not
Yes.
what I choose to do.
Yeah.
However, I might choose to learn aromatherapy or something. That's more likely. I'm more likely to succeed in that because I'm fascinated by it and it
Yes.
thrills me and I love the whole plant aspect and nature and the connection. So it's I think every single one of us has our own unique little inner compass that kind of goes, ooh, this way or this way. And
Yeah.
whatever that might be, as you were saying earlier, whether that's to earn a lot of money or
Yeah.
to care for people, and they're not mutually exclusive either, are they? Or
Yeah.
to work
Yeah.
with animals, or to work with children, or to be a teacher, or a nurse, or a doctor,
Yes.
or whatever your calling might be, then if that is really like feeling like a magnet for you and you just feel all of your inner iron filings are pulling you that way,
Yeah.
that's not something to dismiss, to ignore, to push under the carpet. And for me, I was writing something earlier and remembering how at school I was saying to the careers advisor, I'd like to go in this direction. And they were saying, no, you need to broaden your horizons. That's not a career that's going to be reliable, be solid, earn you a living. Actually, it did.
Yeah.
So it was fairly unusual at the time. I became a sign language interpreter, but I learned so much on that journey and I got so much from learning a different language, learning about a different culture, as I'm sure you did when you went to
Yeah.
Africa.
Yeah, no, completely. And to a certain extent, you're in control of what you do, aren't you, in life? That is something that you can decide. You talked about teachers at school. I had an art teacher, and because I'm left-handed, she said to me, "Oh, Jill, you're never going to be able to do art because you're left-handed." Well, what a limiting belief. So it is my intention next year to go and join an art class, because of course I can. The fact that somebody told me I couldn't do it is actually red rag to a bull. I will do it. I may not be very good, but I will be able to go and do it to a certain degree.
They say that people who are left-handed are much more right-brained, therefore more creative.
No.
There
I
must have been
believed her.
loads of
At the
artists.
time of 13, I believed her, but it was absolute nonsense. And you wouldn't be allowed to do that kind of thing as a teacher now, because it just brings in so many limiting beliefs about life, which of course people experience, but that's not necessary to do with vulnerability.
It does leave you feeling vulnerable and leave you feeling like you don't have, and it disconnects you from yourself. If your inner self is saying, but I'm creative, I am an artist, and the
Yeah.
teacher's telling you, well, you can't be because you're left-handed, then
Yes.
you're kind of, well, they're older and they're a teacher. So, and
Yeah.
particularly when you're young,
Yeah.
I certainly was raised to, you listen to adults, you respect adults, they know more than you.
Yes.
And if a teacher is telling you something, well, they've got to be right, haven't they? So if they're saying, well, you're left handed, that means you can't be an artist.
Yes.
But my inner being is saying, but that's who I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
No,
such a
I
disconnect.
will definitely, I will take the challenge, and I will definitely show I can draw a plant, draw a house, or whatever.
And looking back at those challenges that you experienced, how did allowing yourself to be and to sit in that vulnerable place change that perception you had of yourself and that understanding of you?
That's a good question. Um, I think that vulnerability tends to clarify what actually matters in life. I was so young during these experiences, but there's no doubt that he's taught me not to take life for granted. And at the time, without knowing, although I had many other vulnerable situations since the late 70s, I think it helped me discover a huge sense of resilience. And that's helped me in highly stressful situations during challenging scenarios. So I think that's what I actually learned. But we're talking now about the late 70s. You know, we didn't talk about mental health and how things affected you then, did we?
Not at all, no. And as you
So,
say, it was Brene Brown who totally shifted our concept of vulnerability.
yeah,
She was one of my doorways to all of what I've learned.
I quite agree. She was one of the very first people when I was doing resilience training and actually going through a divorce. She was one of the people that actually gave me hope. There was that one, and feel the fear and do it anyway, with Suzanne somebody or other. I can't remember what it was, but that's a really good book to go and read.
Indeed, yes. I've got a reading list on my website, and there's a whole stack of Brene Brown books on there if anybody wants
Yes,
to take a look.
yes. The Power of Vulnerability is a very good book.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And for anyone listening to this conversation who finds vulnerability deeply uncomfortable and even maybe feeling unsafe to embrace that vulnerability, what have you learnt along your journey about how to lean into that vulnerability in a way which feels supportive rather than overwhelming that you can then share to help people?
Um, I think that it's things like slowing your breathing down. I think that is a great help. I think oddly enough, we talked about this idea about not wearing shoes and feeling grounded. Someone once told me that actually, if you were feeling vulnerable, one of the things you could do is to hold on to something like a chair and have your feet firmly on the ground, so that you may be exposed, but you are supported by the energy from the ground. And I think that's helpful. Talking to yourself as you would talk to a friend, not to criticize yourself, but just say, I'm okay, I'm enough. I can manage this. I think that's really helpful. Um, Looking at vulnerability as a strength, not a weakness, and what you will gain from it. I think all of those are really, really important. Having healthy boundaries, reframing situations. So I think that's what I would go and say to anybody who was feeling very vulnerable and actually wanted to feel supportive rather than overwhelmed.
And maybe reading a book like that one you were talking about from Brene Brown. And as you were saying that about holding on to something, I just caught sight of your logo there, the tree. And when I was in the early stages of my journey, a therapist said to me, get out and walk every day, go to the park and walk in nature, and to feel that energy and that grounding. I
Yeah,
wasn't barefoot, but still being out in energy in nature, you can get a sense of that grounding. And there
yeah,
was a tree in the park that was at an angle. So I
yeah,
used to just lean against this tree because it was a
yes,
lovely just prop angle.
yeah,
And to feel that strong trunk behind my back supporting me. And I
yeah,
could visualize then the branches reaching up to the sky above me, the roots going down into the ground below me, and to get that sense of support and deep grounding, the stability, the nurturing that comes up from the earth, and just be in that
yeah.
tree energy.
Breathe. Yeah, breathe. One of the things that I do, so obviously I went on to resilience coaching, but I also help with people's overall well-being. And one of the things that I invented, at least I have no reason to know that anybody else calls it the same thing, was the golden hour. And this was during COVID. And I used to say to people, you need to find an hour every day, 4 sets of 15 minutes, or 10 minutes times six, where you are thinking about you, because it's not selfish to put yourself first. And if you don't put yourself first, you can't help other people. So the golden hour is all about, it could be going for a walk for 10 minutes. It could be journaling. It could be just sitting and being in the present. While you're making yourself a cup of coffee, you could sort of be thinking about what you're doing now. You can do little exercises by holding onto the shelf and doing tiptoes onto there, just to go and stretch your muscles out. And I have found that has been massively helpful. And I talk to my clients when they're very, very busy about having white space. And white space is very much where you've got a meeting which is between 10 and 11, but making sure that you have that 15 minutes before you have another meeting, because you need to get back into your state of mind and not be thinking about the last meeting before you go on to the next one. Um, and I feel really fulfilled. I feel so fortunate to be at my stage in life and actually, listen, nobody's got everything, but I'm really happy, content, peaceful. Um, and I'm really happy if anybody wants to have a free chemistry call to go and chat to them. I'm very grateful for having this podcast with you, Robin. It's been lovely.
It's wonderful to have these conversations, isn't it? And I've loved hearing your story and what you were saying there about the golden hour and making those moments. They don't have to be the whole hour at once. We can break them down if that's more manageable, which probably is for most people.
Yeah.
And I talk often about being conscious, and I've signed up to Eckhart Tolle's little daily, well, not daily, but now and again, little posts that come through on Instagram. And
Yes.
the latest one that I saw was very much in line with what I talk about in terms of consciousness. When there are things that we do repeatedly, and the kind of idea of stacking, like brushing your teeth, making a cup of tea,
Yeah.
doing it mindfully. So
Yeah.
not just doing it while you're doing something else or doing it and thinking about something else, but focusing on, I am now filling the kettle, I'm switching the kettle on, I'm going to the fridge, I'm getting the milk, or whatever it is that you're doing. And also, for me, in terms of wild and W being wonder, I often
Yes.
talk about little things that are just everyday objects, But this is my cup. It has some of my branding colours on it. It holds my hot drink. It holds my jasmine green tea every morning, which I love, and I can then savour that flavour of the jasmine green tea and the aroma, and just being conscious, which in itself is very grounding, and centering in the moment, that sense of presence, which gives us back that sense of agency rather than being swept along by the tide of my day, which is overwhelming, that wave crashing down and carrying me off somewhere. But when I can just ground in that moment, then it feels like the white noise, like I've had a meeting and then I need that space to decompress. Because spending time with other people, whether it's face to face or it's online, we pick up those energies. And if that meeting has been maybe quite stressed, maybe there's a lot of stuff to try and juggle in your head, it's really good to have that time to breathe, time to reground, regroup before going on to the next thing.
Yeah, and it is the I am now, not in the past, not in the future. I am now. And that's really important. And one last thing, which I didn't perhaps mention, is I do think that one of the most important things, particularly in mid or later life, is to have a really good sense of purpose. You need to be structured and disciplined. Why am I getting up in the morning? And if people, well, if you've got young children, you definitely are up half the night and and in the morning. But as life goes on, life changes, and that's good. We go through all these life transitions, but it is important in mid and later life to really have that sense of purpose of what am I doing, why am I here, and actually who am I now, because it will change from when you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s and 60s.
And that's such an important question. Who am I? Not what am I?
Yeah.
So often when people ask us to introduce ourselves or something, we talk about the what's.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a teacher, I'm a doctor, but that's not who you are.
Yeah, exactly.
So who are you? And even if you don't share that with other people in terms of an introduction, but just to be conscious, I'm more than the what. I am the who. And as you say, that does change and transition over time. But yes, I completely agree that sense of why do I want to get up out of bed every morning? You hear stories of people who retire and they don't live very long afterwards because maybe they don't have that sense of purpose.
Yeah,
That is so true. I ran a workshop a while ago. We were looking at grief and grieving and loss. And one man was saying, I can't retire because I am petrified of what comes after. He didn't have a sense of anything. It just felt like a big gaping hole, big void. So we were looking at that for him. But yes, it's been wonderful having this conversation with you, Gill. Thank you so much. And you mentioned that you welcome people to get in touch with you. That's wonderful. Thank you for that offer. But can you just share where they can find you, how they can connect with you?
Well, they can, in my non-technical way, I can tell you what my website is, which is www.goldcoachuk.com. My email is goldcoachgb@gmail.com, and or I do have a Calendly diary. I'd love to go and speak to anybody, even just 20 minutes of someone just being able to vent how they feel. Obviously, we can't go and sort anything out in that time, but I'm really happy to go and have free chemistry calls of about 20 minutes. And I look forward to hearing from anybody who is interested. And thank you again, Robin.
It's my pleasure. That is such a valuable offer because just that 20 minutes of being seen, being heard, and that space we were talking earlier about breathing, that space to just breathe out and to know that whatever I'm feeling, I'm still okay.
Yeah. And you're not alone.
Exactly. So thank you. And for those of you who've been watching or listening, I'm sure you've been fascinated to hear Gill's story. And if you would like to connect with her, you've heard all of her details. They're also going to be in the show notes below. So do reach out if you're feeling called to do that. And other than that, it's time to say goodbye until the next time. Don't forget to hit the subscribe and stay in touch. Bye for now.
Yes. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth. I hope it's given you a moment to breathe, reflect, and perhaps even see your own story with a little more compassion. If you find this conversation meaningful, I'd love it if you'd share, subscribe, or leave a review. It helps others find their way here too. Until next time, take gentle care, and remember, the journey inwards is where the real growth begins.